Christians kidnapped. Politicians react to the Islamic State abduction as U.S. Christians take their concerns to the White House. Balancing act. A bishop on the front lines of the immigration struggle discusses practicing charity while upholding the law. Free at last. An Indian priest is released after 8 months as a captive in Afghanistan. We hear from a fellow Jesuit. And evangelizing Asia. Thailand's newest cardinal talks about his new role and the responsibility that comes with it. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, February 24th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. ISIS terrorists kidnap at least 70 Christians in Syria, including women and children. As Jason Calvi reports tonight, their fate is unclear.
Brian, victims, families, as well as activists say the Islamic State overran a string of villages in northeastern Syria. The news comes as Christians march from the White House to the Capitol, demanding action.
Down, down, ISIS!
Orange jumpsuits become a symbol not of prison, but martyrdom. Coptic Christians are hitting the streets of the capital more than a week after the Islamic State released video of the beheadings of 21 Coptic Christians working in Libya. And today, the Islamic State swept through villages. ISIS says they seized 10 villages, kidnapping more Christians in the Middle East.
Until now, we have not been able to make contact with any of the hostages. As I said, 90 to 150 people were kidnapped, and 2 people are missing, so we think they have been killed or martyred.
They are Assyrian Christians, both Orthodox and Chaldean Catholics, who trace their roots back to the ancient Mesopotamians and some of the earliest converts to Christianity.
What we're really seeing is sort of one genocide after another, and every single time our numbers are dwindling further and further, and we're on the brink of extinction right now.
Stephen Oshana of the group A Demand for Action wants action.
We're effectively asking for direct international intervention, in this case specifically from the United States military.
Does that include boots on the ground?
That is correct.
For these protesters, the goal is to remind Americans of the dangers Christians face every day in the Middle East. The Wall Street Journal, citing the Assyrian Network for Human Rights, reports that the Islamic State raised their black flag over the villages and even kidnapped priests and blew up a church in the latest rampage. Brian?
Jason, thank you. And now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. President Obama, as expected, vetoes a Republican bill approving the construction of the Keystone XL oil pipeline. The White House sent notice of the veto to the Senate today. It's the third veto of the Obama administration's presidency. The move puts a freeze on a top GOP priority, at least for now. It also reasserts the president's authority over a project that's become a flashpoint in the national debate about climate change. Well, it looks like the Senate will vote this week on legislation to fund the Department of Homeland Security. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he will allow a vote without immigration-related measures conservatives have been demanding.
We have a responsibility to act here. We have a solution to the problem that deals with both things. Number one, giving senators an opportunity to express their disapproval of what the president did in November, and the other gives Senate Democrats an opportunity to have what they've been saying for 2 months they wanted, which was to fund the Department of Homeland Security.
The Senate could still vote separately on a proposal to overturn one of the president's controversial immigration executive orders. If the House concurs with the funding measure, a partial shutdown of Homeland Security at the end of the week would be avoided. The Obama administration takes heat today for its Iran policy. Chief White House correspondent Suzanne LaFranchi reports tonight. Suzanne?
Well, Brian, President Obama welcomed the leader of Qatar to the White House today. The two men discussed common security issues in the Middle East, everything from defeating ISIS to derailing Iran's nuclear program.
Our goal here is to be able to verify that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. And that we will continue to press Iran on some of its other actions in the region that often have a destabilizing effect.
President Obama defends nuclear negotiations with Iran against accusations from some opposition groups that Iran is secretly enriching plutonium. After returning from talks that both sides called productive, Secretary of State John Kerry told members of Congress that opposition to a deal is premature.
Anybody running around right now jumping in to say, well, we don't like the deal or this or that, doesn't know what the deal is. There is no deal yet.
Illinois Republican Mark Kirk voiced deep concerns over the U.S. working with Iran to fight ISIS.
I would just point out the notion that getting Iran to help fight ISIS is like hiring the local town psychopathic pyromaniac to join the volunteer fire department.
Well, Senator, we're not hiring them. They're doing what's in their own self-interest.
Meanwhile, ISIS continues to terrorize the region. Utah Republican Orrin Hatch condemned the latest kidnapping of Christians in Syria.
I consider those people beyond redemption. And it's just pitiful that we can't, as the greatest nation on the earth, put together a worldwide coalition to go against that type of impossible behavior.
Congress will continue to discuss Mideast terror this week. The president's request for war powers will be the topic of a hearing on Thursday. Brian?
Thanks. Suzanne LaFranchi at the White House tonight. And dozens are injured, 4 critically, as a Southern California commuter train slams into a truck abandoned on the tracks. 3 rail cars were sent tumbling on their sides in the early morning fiery crash. The Metrolink train, carrying 48 passengers, was bound for Los Angeles. A truck driver found several miles away is being questioned about abandoning that vehicle. Alaska is now the 3rd state to legalize the recreational use of marijuana. Their law says you must be 21 to buy it. You can't have more than 1 ounce in your possession. Voters approved a referendum in November to allow adults to smoke in private, a term not fully clarified. Recreational use of marijuana is also legal now in Washington state and in Colorado. Some heavy weapons are being moved from the front line in eastern Ukraine by Russian-backed separatists. But the Ukrainian government isn't convinced this is a genuine pullback. Ukraine's military spokesman says rebels are just regrouping and relocating their weapons. The government says it will start withdrawing their weapons when there's a ceasefire for 2 days. A negotiated agreement aims to create a wide buffer zone between separatists and Ukrainian forces. Nearly 5,800 people have died in that conflict since April. Secretary of State John Kerry accuses Russia of engaging in propaganda war.
They have been persisting in their misrepresentations, lies, whatever you want to call them, about their activities there to my face, to the face of others, on many different occasions.
Kerry says the administration is still considering the possibility of arming the Ukrainian military. He also asked Congress to approve adequate financial support for Ukraine. Hundreds attend today's funeral for a Danish filmmaker shot to death at a cultural center in Copenhagen a week ago. Denmark's prime minister attended the heavily guarded service. 2 people were killed and 5 police officers wounded in 2 separate attacks in the Danish capital February 13th. One attack was at a synagogue, the other at this cultural center. The suspected gunman was killed by police. A Jesuit priest is now free after 8 months of captivity in Afghanistan. Father Alexis Prem Kumar is back home with his family in India. He was abducted last June while serving as the director of Jesuit Refugee Services for Afghanistan. India Prime Minister Narendra Modi was involved in securing his release. Father Peter Balais is the International Director of Jesuit Refugee Services. He is joining us from Rome. And Father Peter, did Jesuit Refugee Services have any contact with Father Kumar while he was held captive?
No, we did not have direct contact with him, but we received one small video clip in October, beginning November from him. This was our first proof of life after 4 months in captivity.
Well, I'm sure you're very relieved that he is now free. The Jesuits, of course, have been doing missionary work, evangelizing for centuries. There are Jesuit martyrs. Pope Francis is a Jesuit himself. Is it rare, though, that today that a Jesuit's work, his ministry, would put him in harm's way?
I mean, we work in Afghanistan since 2004. Now, not to evangelize in that sense. We do humanitarian work, education work in Afghanistan. We believe this is the expression of love for people who have gone through decades of war and to build a new Afghanistan with a young generation.
Also, the Prime Minister of India actually got involved in the negotiations for Father Kumar's release. He has been criticized for not doing enough for religious minorities in his country. How important is his involvement in all this?
I mean, we have worked all on the various levels, the Indian government, the Afghan government, and our team on the ground. We worked relentless, everyday meetings, our negotiation team on the ground. We had also a lot of information and contacts, but the final deal, the agreement or whatever, was done by the Indian government by their contact with the captors. And that is, of course, very important, and I think it made it easier for the release of him. We are very grateful to the Indian government. And I think, yes, there's this discussion about in India, but if this helps also to bring the Indian nation together and the Prime Minister who reaches out for everyone in need of his population, of the people, I think it's something good. It's a grace which also comes out of this. So we are happy with that.
And how is Father Kumar? Have you talked to him since he was released?
Yes, I spoke with him yesterday and the evening before, on the first day when he was released. He's in good spirit and well, but I gradually know it takes time till we get all the accounts. I was just reading that most of the time he was handcuffed and also his feet were in chains just to avoid that he was running away, but there were also moments with the morning tea to go out and so on. But he was pretty much always, kept as handcuffed, and was quite tough also for him.
Assure him of our prayers. Father Peter Beiss joining us from Rome, the International Director for Jesuit Refugee Services. Thank you, Father.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, given the costs involved, does it pay for parents of young children to work? And immigration reform is an issue hitting close to home for a Texas bishop. Thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday evening. With the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. The political posturing on immigration reform continues here in Washington. Republicans, of course, questioning the president's authority to take executive action in November. Well, a Catholic bishop on the front lines hopes that politics will not keep the faithful from seeing the larger picture. Wyatt Goolsby reports.
Immigrants trying to make their way illegally into the United States is a daily concern for U.S. border authorities. Most are escaping violence from Mexico and other parts of Central America. It's a scene all too familiar to Bishop Daniel Flores of the Diocese of Brownsville, Texas. Last summer, Catholics in his area helped provide food and shelter for thousands of refugees that flooded in from Central America.
I think it's exemplary for the whole of the church. They saw not a political problem. They didn't see a situation that basically required first a response from a government official, but that I as a human being need to respond to this human being who is in dire straits.
Flores spoke at the Catholic University of America today about immigration. He says he doesn't have all the answers when it comes to the politics, but the Texas bishop explained why the church is invested in the issue.
What we have to kind of do as a church, I believe, certainly the bishops are in favor of this, is we have to kind of encourage all people of goodwill to recognize that there are human lives that are very vulnerable in this situation, and that really is a moral responsibility.
For many Americans, the challenge is balancing charity with enforcing the laws already in place. John Malcolm with the Heritage Foundation says as much as we want to help others in need, as a country, we have to be practical.
Any country has to be able to control its borders, assimilate people who come into this country, and to draw a line between people who play by the rules and those who do not. And, look, there are tough issues involved here. That's why there has to be negotiation between the president and Congress.
But a deal on Capitol Hill seems far off right now. Bishop Flores says no matter where you stand politically, Americans shouldn't ignore the problem. Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Wyatt. The United States has named its first international envoy for gay rights. Openly gay diplomat Randy Berry is tapped for that job. On behalf of the Obama administration, he will promote the rights of people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. The State Department says a priority is to overturn laws in more than 75 countries where same-sex activity is a criminal offense. Anna Halpine is founder of the World Youth Alliance. That's a group defending the dignity of the human person at the United Nations. Anna's joining us from New York City. And why do you think the Obama administration is making LGBT discrimination a priority?
Well, this has been a priority for them from the beginning of their administration. I think it's just a little bit unsettling for people, given the enormous global issues that we're facing right now, that this would take an even higher list of ranking in the priorities that they're pursuing. A lot of people where we are at the UN can show them the very clear pushback and the difficulty that this poses. And some of the countries where they're looking to do very difficult diplomatic maneuvers, particularly across the Middle East and Africa and in Russia.
What do you think this envoy will ask of other governments around the world?
That's something that waits to be seen. Obviously, I and all of the people that I work with in the World Youth Alliance and at the UN are very concerned about any situation where a person might be faced with discrimination that would be life-threatening or any other area due to their sexual orientation or any other reason. But that doesn't seem to be what this envoy is there to do. When you look at the announcement from the State Department, there's a much broader statement that indicates that they're working with a whole range of partners that will be looking at changing laws in countries that pose any kinds of discrimination to a broad range of equality topics. So I think we'll have to see whether this is an envoy that really keeps the subject limited and is able to work to ensure that basic human rights are available to all people, which have already been guaranteed in different UN treaties and documents, or if this is used as a political tool to promote more progressive agendas.
How would you say we as Catholics can and should support the human rights, the dignity of human beings without having to support this agenda as such?
Well, obviously, the dignity of every human person is something that we defend at the World Youth Alliance, and I think every Catholic should be able to defend that as well. That starts at a very technical level, from defending basic human rights that people have to life and to other basic conditions needed for flourishing and human activity. And it goes even beyond that, I think, to really affirming and welcoming these people in our homes, in our friendships, and in our communities. But where we start to look at special rights that codify or change the way that families and countries operate, particularly in areas where we redefine how we understand the human family and what support children and parents need to raise those families, then I think that we need to be much, clearer-nosed about what we're talking about and make sure that the priorities of the most vulnerable take that first position.
Anna Halpine with the World Youth Alliance joining us from New York City by Skype. Thanks for being with us tonight, Anna.
Thank you.
And some parents in Britain are asking themselves, does it pay to work? Catherine Szeltner reports on a rising problem for families with young children.
Childcare is taking a tumble in the UK. Family and Childcare Trust reports the average price to send a child to a daycare for 1 week has risen over 5% this past year. With salaries largely staying the same, many parents need to make tough decisions.
Probably have to give up work and do it that way, because of my entire wage would go on childcare, so it wouldn't be worthwhile.
I'm a full-time teacher. My partner's a fireman. You'd expect with two decent salaries to be able to, cope financially, but it is difficult.
Dr. Maria Sofia Aguirre is a professor of economics at Catholic University of America. She says the rising cost of childcare is a global dilemma.
Today, in the United States, women between the ages 25 and 35 with graduate degrees are choosing to remain at home instead of working.
Dr. Aguirre's research shows it barely pays to work if you're in a two-income household. But if modern-day moms want a professional career, she says look for the right place to take your young one.
To move more into community-based, locally based, smaller kind of arrangements, because it's closer to the normal life of a child.
Experts agree couples should devote serious time and thought to balancing family and work. After all, as the church teaches, the family is the building block of human society. Catherine Szeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, its natural desolate beauty leads scientists to believe Antarctica holds clues to Earth's past and future. And we meet Thailand's new cardinal. He tells us why Pope Francis is focusing on Asia. It is good to have you with us for EWTN News Nightly on this 24th of February, a Tuesday evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. Earth's past, present, and future converge in the wildest, most desolate, and mysterious of the continents. Some scientists believe Antarctica may provide clues to answering humanity's most important questions. A frozen corner of the Earth few people have seen in person. Antarctica's remote beauty, a seductive draw for scientists and thrill seekers for nearly 200 years.
From when I first picked up the book of Robert Falcon Scott about when he was traversing the South, well, from the moment I read the book, I said to myself, this is something you have to do.
Once a rich destination for whales, seal oil, and fur, many now believe the continent holds the clues to some of humanity's most important questions, including where we came from and what the future may hold for the planet. This past January, the Associated Press spent nearly 2 weeks with scientists seeking leftovers from the Big Bang and signs of melting ice.
If you compare now with 25 years ago when I first came to this part of the Antarctic, you can see entire valleys have become free of ice in some cases. Certainly ice has got thinner, glaciers have retreated, whole new areas of land have become available.
But to unlock many of Antarctica's mysteries, scientists must brave extreme environments, from climbing an active volcano to exploring below its frigid waters.
What's magical about diving in Antarctica is that it's a completely indomitable place. There's fauna that you can only find here. It's wild, natural, and only a few can make it here.
Last year, more than 37,000 tourists braved some of the Earth's coldest temperatures, more than double the number of visitors in just a few years. Nearly 2 centuries after the first explorers set foot on its frozen ground, Antarctica continues to provide a window into mankind's past and possibly its future. Much of the nation feeling that winter chill that they've experienced there for a long time. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker still isn't sure if he'll run for president in 2016. He says he has to make sure it is God's will for him and his family.
I'm still trying to decipher if this is God's calling. Because I said the closer you get to this, the more you realize you got to be crazy to want to be president of the United States. You got to be crazy. When you look at what it does to a person and a family, you got to be crazy. You should only do it if you feel God is calling you to get in there and make a difference.
Walker's comments came at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention recently in Tennessee. Thailand's newest cardinal tells EWTN News Nightly Pope Francis wants to go to the peripheries of the church. He believes that's the reason he was given a red hat.
It's the moment of Asia in this moment that Pope Francis considered this. But in the same time, it's been also our responsibility to bring ahead also this witnessing of the love of God to the Asian people.
Thailand's population is mostly Buddhist. According to CIA statistics, only 1.2% are Christians. Even fewer than that are Catholics. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. Until tomorrow, we hope you'll like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. If you'd like to see this again, you can always go to EWTN's YouTube page. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night and God bless you.